Hi, my name is Charles Mickey. I'm at the Lanier Theological Library, where I'm the director, and I am privileged to have with me today Professor Floentino Garcia-Martinez. He is world-class scholar, top-notch, highly recognized as an expert in Dead Sea Scrolls. And so we're going to engage him today and ask him some questions as if we know nothing about the Dead Sea Scrolls. In front of us are some examples.
Precisely these two scrolls are part of the first 7 scrolls discovered by the Bedouins family in 1947 in a cave not far from Jerusalem and quite close to the Dead Sea. This is the reason why I call Dead Sea Scrolls. There are not dead scrolls, they are much alive. But they are from the first cave discovered in this time, where this exactly two, the rule of the community and the Pesher Habakkuk, or the commentary of Habakkuk, were photographed in the American schools of Oriental research and later were acquired by the Israel government once that the Syrian bishop exported them from Israel to the States to sell via a mediator to the son of the professor of the Hebrew University who has bought the other scrolls found at the same time. But because these scrolls were first brought to the Albright Institute, to the American School for Oriental Research in Jerusalem, one of the young students there took the photograph of the scrolls, and they were the first published, even before the rule of the war, the scroll of the war of the Hodayot, published by Professor Sukenik. So this one is a very well preserved, and it conserved the rules by which they live, the group who collected this enormous library of writings. These were found, I'd say, in 47. Afterwards, in 52, they were found in other caves with much more fragments, and until 56, when the latest cave with manuscript was found. Altogether, there were 11 caves with remains of this bibliothèque found, and many other caves where these people were living near the ruins of a community settlement where were all deposited this that we call library of Qumran, which is the place there. And this concrete scroll gives the rules and the thought and the prayers of this group of people who put this collection together. We call this the rule of the community of the Yahat, and it is very well preserved, but in cave 4 there are fragmentary copies, at least 8 copies from the same composition with little difference. There are corrections and there are changing some of the penancy from the things that has not been done. There's other corrections that are cancellated. So that means that the rules were not once and for all, but was continually evolving in the time. They were
adjusting the laws as they lived together. And this community is called the Qumran.
The Qumran of the, more exactly we know so now Yahat, because they call themselves Anshe Yahat, or the men of the unity. Qumran, because of the place where the scroll was found, is in the Khirbet, in ruins of Qumran, but they don't tell us, well, they tell us many of the names they use for themselves. The poor, the just, the sons of light, the sons of darkness, the Anshe Hayachat, the men of the community. And for this reason, they call this the rule of the community of life. The scroll is quite complete, as you will see here at the end. There is only one column has been attached, so as this, night to the other, and here there were two other compositions that has been published independently because they were sold to the museum and not to the dealer who brought deeds for the Marcion. The rule of the benedictions and the rule of the Gemeenschap. This is a quite interesting scroll. You see the difference of size. There are many of the scrolls are big size, about 30 centimeters, and others are just little, we call it sort of pocket scrolls, easier to carry, but this is very interesting because it's the best preserved copy of a commentary. They were quoting the biblical text. In this case is the prophet Habakkuk. They were quoting a part of the text and saying the interpretation of the meaning of this is, and this was explained to which that referred, and everything referred to this, the history of the present in which the community lived. They said that there is the explanation from the end, the final times, Harit Hayamin, and in this time, they said, well, Habakkuk was talking that the teacher of the righteousness will be persecuted, of that the priest, the wicked priest will persecute the other, all these sort of things, but it's quite systematical. It's quoting the biblical text, interpreted it, quoted, interpreted, until not completely the end, because the end of the manuscript is empty, and it's only the two first chapters of Habakkuk. The third chapter is not commented. Don't ask me why. We see that the end of this manuscript is written by a different scribe. It's a little different sort of writing. And if you look at to the form of the letters, you will directly notice that they are quite different from this, from the rule of the community, and from this one. This letter is quite old, relatively old. It's around the year 100, from the first century before the Common Era. While this is an Herodian writing from the end of the first century BCE, of the beginning from the first century Common Era. It's more like the Hebrew we are used in our Bibles, because it's the formal Herodian script, the originally Aramaic.
So about how many years between what you see here versus this?
Yeah.
Maybe about
between the copies,
the copies.
We cannot say that these are autographs of the originals. These copies about the year, I will say 100 years of difference. In this one, the main figure, the leader of this group, has already died. It's written, the commentary, after his death. The way is clear, and all things talk about him, but talk about him as already what happened in his life, or what happened after he passed away.
All right.
When this don't mention this figure, but mention that in this column 8, this one with the part empty, is still considering it as a project of the future. When these things happen, you will go to the desert to prepare the way of the Lord, and you will be doing so and so there. This is also one commentary of the same sort that the one from the cave one, but this of the prophet Isaiah. There are 4 commentaries of the book of Isaiah, and this is all that has been preserved, those 3 columns, one in the middle which is quite complete, is also from little size manuscript, and is the same system, quote Isaiah and give the interpretation. Bisro al Obser Hadabar, the meaning of this quote is that. This is also quite interesting because it's also quite old, but that is a biblical text. It's 2 fragments from the book of Kohelet. What is it in English?
Also known Ecclesiastes.
Ecclesiastes is one of the. There are from the about 950 scrolls that we have found in the 11 copies. About 25% are copies of the books of the Old Testament. that we call the Old Testament, the Hebrew Bible. And all of them are represented with more or less quantity of copies, except one, the Book of Esther. You have there in Megillat Esther, in the scrolls of Esther, but from Esther there are nothing, it has not found nothing in the scrolls.
That's the only one.
And the only one. We don't know why. Well, Esther is a quite peculiar book. This one the feast of the Hanukkah, and it was used by the Asmoneans. The people don't like the Asmoneans. The name of God doesn't appear there. The pious Esther is not so kosher as we would say. We don't know the reasons. But there are 3 copies in Aramaic of a sort similar story. The names are different, are not Esther or Mardocheus, are Petit-Resa. But the story is in the king that cannot sleep and discover that, read the annals of the kingdom, discover that is a Jew that has been very good, has not been rewarded, and is common enemy, and this more or less similar story. And that we have in several of these apocryphal writings, over writings, for accordance for the stories of the book of Daniel. We have a very nice, the prayer of Nabonidus, that there are similar stories but with retold otherwise. So, but I was saying from the 950, about 25% are from the biblical books. About 25% are these compositions that we think that they were written by the people who put the scrolls together. And about 50%, so as much as that we call this sectarian of Quranic works and biblical works, are these other compositions that were mostly unknown, that some of them we knew from translation of translations, because they were kept in one of another church, like the book of Jubilees, of the book of Enoch in the church of Ethiopia, but otherwise the originals were lost. And we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 8 copies from the original, from Enoch in Aramaic, of Jubilees in Hebrew, and many, many similar compositions that was the literature the Jews were reading and were writing, and in which they were developing the same religious ideas that we find in the Old Testament. That makes the collection as such so interesting, because not only reflect the customs and the laws and the interpretation of the law and the poetry and the prayer of a little group there in the desert by the Dead Sea, but also has preserved for us the enormous richness of the Jewish literature that was completely lost, but that made us understand the growing of the Jewish thought that later will reappear in both the main religions later time, in the rabbinic Judaism and in Christianity that started as a Jewish group. We see, thanks to this literature, the growth from this literature that will be flourished later on in the writings of the two main religions, Judaism and Christianity, in the 1st and the 2nd century from the Common Era.